Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today I'm very honored to have Sascha Ragtschaa in the hot seat to talk about all things own. And coupled with that is a very important term, and that is equity. Sash is going to explain exactly what own has been doing of late. Originally, they were known as Chainium, and they have changed as they changed the game for the equity markets. Sash, thank you very much for being on the channel today.
Brad, absolutely. Thank you very much. Thanks for your time. And, we had a great chat a few months ago, and I'm really looking forward for this interview. Yeah, thanks very much.
Not a problem, mate. And it's an honor to have you on. There's been a lot of talk about own, and we're going to understand why exactly. So, Sash, let's just move it back for a moment to the original slogan. It says that you are the global equity marketplace. It's all about you trying to make business seamless via equity, via the offerings, via being and removing the middleman. Tell us a bit about own in your words so we can really start to dig deep from the beginning.
Yeah, so what we do in own is we tokenize financial assets, and we're focusing on equities, so shares, stocks, basically those terms. And what we do is we help businesses to raise capital through security token offers or tokenizing assets. So we focus on primary issuance, we focus on the servicing element quite heavily. So we've just released a shareholder register where you can register shares and you can register your issuers, investors, shareholders. Yeah, what we do is we tokenize financial assets. We work quite heavily with enterprises. So we help them to tokenize their assets, and we manage the whole life cycle end to end.
Right. So obviously, and I didn't mean to cut you off there, but I want to dig deep into each of those parts, Sash, so we can really explore these, particularly given that we're looking at an update now. So let's start with that. So obviously, you are out in the market. You are on the exchanges right now. Your token is called CHX. Now, I want to talk about you first, though, and this is important because of your experience, and we'll go into your team very quickly. Sash, why is it that you're able to lead something complex like this? Because it is complex. There's not that many blockchain-related companies that are trying to do what you're doing. Why do you matter in this with regard to enterprise and leadership?
Well, the team and I, we've managed in equities in the servicing industry for more than 15 years. I was the CIO of the largest share registrar in the world. So I managed basically issuers, investors, systems and services across pretty much all the regions. We had some of the largest businesses on our register, and the company still has. And the team and I, we basically started own simply because we could see the inefficiencies from within. We could see the legacy systems. We could see the lack of innovation for shareholders. And our aim is to make a difference. And blockchain technology and what we're building allows us to do that.
Right. Okay. So clearly you have the experience. I've read in your resume, it's also worldwide. You've worked in several different companies, and particularly you have experience in the software engineering department, which is crucial for the blockchain component, I would imagine. But with regard to enterprise, do you feel confident, given your work experience there, that you can really lead out that component? Because that seems to be the buzzword right now, is blockchain business.
Absolutely. And enterprises are quite interesting. They are they have the need, they understand that blockchain technology will be disruptive and it will improve things for them. So enterprises are looking for, first and foremost, they're looking for process improvement. They're looking for fee reductions. They're looking for simplification of their technology suites. And that's what we're offering with our product suite. And they're also very hesitant to engage and deal with open source projects. You have to be quite careful. Information security, scalability, and also basically the standing of teams and businesses is very important to these guys. And we know them. We've worked with them in the traditional space for a very long time. So we basically speak the same language.
Right. Okay. So you qualified there, you get all the ticks. Let's talk about the problem right now, though. We hear about the economic crisis happening in the mainstream marketplace. Wall Street's, having some problems. The rich are getting richer. In your own notes, I've even read that the IPO listings have been becoming less and less. They're declining year in, year out, simply because of this chasm we see with wealth being, moved to the top. How are you going to redress this specifically by doing something like this with you via the blockchain?
Well, it's quite simple. You look at ICOs, for example. ICOs picked up steam last year, and the reason was, projects, teams, businesses could raise capital without going through a bank, a broker, or anyone. Just basically, you put your project up and you go through the process, and you're able to attract investors. Yeah. However, the ICO model is flawed, as we know, right? There's no backing to actual ownership and these sort of things. And
Right.
if you look at the traditional IPO market over the last 20, 30 years, only large businesses were able to go to the stock market. Yeah. So you hear of the Spotifys, the Teslas, the Facebooks, and all that. They go onto the stock market because they can. They have the money, they have the funds. However, 99% of our businesses and 99% of the economy that makes businesses that make up the economy are small to medium businesses, and they simply don't have the money to go to the stock market. So what we're offering is a whole new way, a whole new model for these guys. It's not an ICO. It's almost like security tokens, right? A tokenization of capital, of ownership, but with the same safeguarding and protection for investors and issuers as of the traditional world, but to a fraction of the price. That's the key.
Well, let's talk about that in the context of Wall Street, though. Is it fair to say, legitimately, that you are almost trying to provide for a Wall Street-like access for business, for enterprise, so they can move in, access capital, engaging capital, users and consumers also, in a way that hasn't been done before?
Absolutely, absolutely. And you know, the Wall Street guys, the guys that deal with traditional equities, they understand that you need 10, 15 people in the middle. You need advisors, lawyers to do an issuance. You need, you know, all these service providers to manage your shareholdings, your ownership and all that. And they want quicker and more nimble and more flexible means. I mean, as an example, settlement, you know, if you start, once you purchase shares and you own them, the settlement takes a few days. Yeah, that is basically locked up money, locked up capital, not just for businesses, for institutions, for brokers, for dealers and all that. If you can shrink that down to just a few milliseconds, they'll go for it. So it's an absolute no-brainer. And Wall Street and traditional financial services are definitely looking at these ways. And we're providing means and technology to allow them to do that.
Right. Well, let's now talk about the term you used before, and that was the digital share certificates. I really want to understand this further for the audience and for myself. Now, why is this such a key part of your architecture, and why does it drive the whole internal economy of OWN?
Well, if you look at it, the share register, which we released just recently, is the heart and soul of what we do, because you need to manage and track ownership of the tokens or the assets that you acquired, either through an issuance or a secondary market and all that. At any point of time, you need to understand who owns what asset, and you need to understand who those people are. Anonymity just doesn't work in that model, and it doesn't work. If you, as a business, you have shareholders, you want to know who they are. Yeah. So our register manages that ownership and manages that life cycle and provides that linkage between you as a business and your shareholders. Yeah. We've introduced blockchain technology, so we can have a direct link, a direct contract between the two parties. We have a framework around it that ensures regulation, security, and all that. Right. But that direct link, knowing who you are, we provide to our system, and that is really, really important in the equity space.
Right. Well, let's talk about that in the context of your public and private components. You're a holistic design, something, again, that hasn't been done. I would argue that hasn't been done before at all. I think you've even said that before in the last time we spoke. Why is this approach so important to the way in which you're going to move forward in the business market?
Yeah, we have a private and a permissioned blockchain, and we have a public and a transparent blockchain that is basically open and available. And the reason why we've done this, because we want issuers and investors to have protected data environments. And that's why we have a private and permissioned blockchain ring where issuer and investor data is safeguarded and is protected. And also, if you sell into enterprises and businesses, they won't disclose, and they don't want their data out in the public, even if it's hashed or encrypted or whatever. And the public and the transparent element, so the public blockchain, which is fully decentralized, fully available, is to ensure that ownership and transactions are, in the sense, public, that you, Brad, know that you know, your neighbors or some of theirs, they hold shares in a business, in a public business, for example, they should disclose that. Even in the private businesses, shareholder disclosure is key. So you should know that, you know, certain individuals or whatever own certain percentages of business. You don't know more of the details. You don't know the investor data or anything that is protected by GDPR, any data privacy rights, but you should know that people or institutions own a certain percentage of the business. That's why we made it.
And also the trackability, the fact that it's transparent. We can go and trace all of the transactions from the beginning.
Absolutely.
That it's on the public, and that is imperative. Let's now talk about maximalism. Is it dead in enterprise? We hear of the narrative, the first iterations, no disrespect to the first examples with Bitcoin, but is the whole concept of the idealism inherent with maximalism dead with regard to enterprise? And I ask you this because we hear this all the time inside the crypto space when it comes to trying to engage in enterprise. You alluded to the requisites, the demands for some kind of private mechanism built into your whole system. Again, the maximalists are suggesting we have this very autonomous system. We have such that circumvents authority and circumvents all current systems. What do you say to that?
I think there's a balance. I mean, full decentralization, full open source has an absolute meaning and an existence in the society. The Bitcoins, etc. This is groundbreaking stuff. However, enterprises shy away from utilizing the technology. They have a watch and see approach. As a CIO, as a CTO, you do get fired picking the wrong technology. So people apply a very conservative and watch and see approach. However, the underlying technology everyone wants to use. Now, companies like ourselves or others are creeping up that are catering more towards enterprises that have more enterprise technology approach. And these larger enterprises will talk to us and they will listen to us because they understand the benefits. But I think both have existence, but enterprises are commercial, they're business oriented. There needs to be a business benefit and a business need. And that's what you have to explain to them and get to them. And then they'll pick and choose. Yeah.
Right. And inherent in that is that the private aspect, the demands from your experience, is that what's coming from them, that they're articulating that they want to have a private and permission component?
Absolutely, absolutely. You talk to large organizations and all that, and the biggest fear they have is that there's data leakage, that there's data moving out of their environment, that they cannot control certain things. A lot of them want to host environments in their own infrastructure, in their whole data center. Yeah, you look at guys like Ripple and all that; they're successful because they're catering for a specific niche. Is it in the true sense of decentralization? Probably not, but it's in the true sense of enterprise-wide adoption, and that's where the benefits are. So again, both elements have an existence, but would a large organization adopt Ethereum or EOS or whatever? Maybe not. Yeah, that they're looking at data privacy protection, information security standards, and all that, and some of the open source projects are simply not there yet. And if you look at Linux, Unix, it took ages for it to be adopted into mainstream enterprises, because Microsoft was there and Microsoft was trying to tell everyone, don't go there because it's dangerous and all that. But eventually it did. So it's the same with blockchain. It'll take some time.
Right. Well, let's talk about that with regard to your own code. You alluded to Linux. It was an open source code. Yours is not entirely like that. You do have patents as built in. So talk us through the degree that is closed source and the degree that's open.
Yeah, I mean, our public blockchain is open source, and we're making this public. It's available on GitHub. It can be downloaded and all of that. The private components and some of the consensus mechanisms that we've built in are private simply because that's our IP and that's a little bit our edge, and we don't want to give it away because we are a revenue generating business, and we have to be mindful of patents, of protection, all that. We don't copy from others. We build everything ourselves. Our apps are basically ours. We're not making those open source. Our register is closed source. Some of the other apps, because again, that's our IP and that's our knowledge. And we know in the crypto world, there's a lot of copy and pasting going on, even between the largest teams, and we don't want to play that.
Right. So your secret sauce is that small percentage that's the IP, and that makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about these three terms: B2C, B2B, and B2D. Do you fit in all three categories?
Yes, we do. So a good example, B2C, our DSR or register is open to the public. We'll be offering primary issuance and a secondary market in future. So anyone can log in online and can effectively issue, security tokens. If you are a business, you can already log on onto our platform and you can register your shareholders, and it's free. imagine that we've released it free. If you go to a share registrar or transfer agent, they charge you a massive fee for that. If you go to a trustee or an accountant, they charge you a fee to manage the register, and we provide that free to the public. That's something of us giving back. So that's B2C. B2B is all the tokenization of financial assets. So we work with private banks, we work with asset wealth managers, private equity networks, family offices, that insurance companies, and we help them to tokenize their existing assets. And we provide our tools and technologies, so primary offer portal, a registration, a secondary market, a bulletin board. We provide that to these guys. And B2D is, you probably mean B2 development,
yes,
or developers.
Yes.
We are working on APIs where we're basically opening up our backend services for other people that want to build decentralized apps on our equity marketplace.
Right, and I really want to talk about all of those in terms of evidence, and we're going to get to that for all those categories. But now is a really important part of your design. You have your corporate structure set in motion in Liechtenstein. So talk us through what you went through to make this a corporate structure and the rigors involved if someone was considering it, just how serious it is to set up something like this.
Yeah, Liechtenstein, I mean, we see ourselves as ambassadors in Liechtenstein. You know, we have Klaus, who's the ex-prime minister of Liechtenstein. We have really, really good relationships to the regulator, to the government and all that. And we feel Liechtenstein gives us the best model to set up a blockchain, business in a sense. Liechtenstein has introduced a blockchain law, which is currently in consultancy and open to the public to respond. I think as of last week or the week before, there's an English version available as well. I can send you the link.
Okay.
And it's the first country that has issued a blockchain law, which describes how utility, security, and other tokens and the whole token economics are managed. It's a world first, and we feel quite proud to be in it, to be participating with it, and we have a lot of discussions and engagements with the government and the regulator in that space.
I just want to interrupt you there for a moment as well, Sash, because having looked at your history as you've evolved, it's been about a year now. Were you heavily involved with the government and the ex-Prime Minister, I would assume even the current Prime Minister to a degree, as they were building out their plans from the legal standpoint, and you from the business end? Was there a lot of discussion for building out this act?
Yeah, we weren't really involved in drafting the law. I mean, we had a few legal guys were involved. We know them, a few really, really good engineers, and obviously the government. But we've been talking to the government in the sense of the service providers and what's involved. We are positioning ourselves as the register, basically, for these sort of tokens. And the regulator and the government are actually recommending our services to anyone that wants to issue security tokens and these sort of things.
Right.
So we've been heavily adopted.
I want to talk to you about the current Prime Minister, because when we see X, I want to find out whether that's transferred into the current leadership and the support. So are you still feeling like you've got support from the top down in Liechtenstein?
Absolutely. I mean, the current Prime Minister, he is very fully supportive of fintech. He's very pro-blockchain and all that. You wouldn't get a law in place if the politics and the government wouldn't be heavily supported, and they get a lot of resistance. They get a lot of pushback from the European Union, and everyone is watching, and obviously Switzerland as the competitor are heavily looking at them as well. But they are very pro fintech, and we've been very well supported, so we can feel quite proud and quite gifted in the sense that we're there.
Absolutely. Now, there's one more thing that you are close to achieving, or if you haven't yet, you will find out. And that is with regard to your European banking license. Again, something very difficult to achieve, and I'm not FOMOing, I just have read into it. It is certainly something that is very comprehensive in the application and in the process. Talk us through where you specifically are at with regard to attaining this.
Yeah, we started the application process for dealing and trading license in Liechtenstein. It's very, very early days because we're still engaging with the regulator. I can't disclose too much because it's still in a lot of discussions.
I don't mind if you do.
Yeah, but we're going through the process. Very rigorous. It's very time consuming. You have to have your governance model in place. You have your risk and compliance model in place. There's capital requirements. There's processing requirements. Especially when you want to issue and manage securities in future, you're basically looking at, a proper license to issue securities like the traditional sense. So there's a lot of hefty requirements in that sense.
Are you optimistic, though, from your experience, the 15 years you've had in the whole sector, are you optimistic that you're going to get the all clear, the green light?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really just work. It's, legal work. It's paperwork. It's lots of documentation. It's something that will happen, and we will definitely get it in future. The time frame is always the question mark. It could be 6 months, could be 9 months, could be 12 months. But we're going through that now, and it's a normal process. I think you will see in future a lot of teams going through the same process, and it's interesting. And I think a lot of teams, and especially the crypto exchanges, will basically just not manage to get through, because you have to be 100% transparent. You have to disclose everything. You have to have a proper board structure. Your investors, your shareholders, they all need to be sound. They can't be dubious. And without poo-pooing everyone else, I think the crypto exchanges will struggle. Yeah.
Right. And I think it's important you raise that, because what you're saying is that there's going to be very serious and rigorous demands from the government, not just for transparency, but for demonstration that you are foolproof, 100% legitimate right from the start, and you can evidence that on paper.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like running a stock exchange. I mean, not many people can actually run a stock exchange. You need to have the experience, need to have the capital, you need to have the risk profile, you need your track record and CV needs to be really, really sound. I mean, all these things they're reviewing, right? If you've never actually run a stock exchange, how can they grant you a license? Because you have no experience.
Since you started so early, does that put you in pole position from your perspective, particularly in Liechtenstein, but even generally in Europe? There'd be very few that are in the position you're in, given that you started so early in this marketplace.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we started that process early. I think there's 1 or 2 teams that are much, much earlier ahead of us, and they're focusing on purely exchange. I mean, ultimately, we're a servicer. We don't really need the license, but we want to be in control of our own destiny in future. But we're definitely in the first wave of these sort of services.
Well, let's talk about your investors. I want to talk to you about the University of Liechtenstein and also UNIBRIGHT. They came up as ones I wanted to discuss specifically. Why both of them?
University of Liechtenstein or universities in general, we're quite close to academics, and we've done that in the past. So, in my previous job, I had relationships with Deakin University, with Melbourne University in Australia, as an example, and we've been lecturing there. We've been telling people about new technology items in my previous job, and we had a lot of graduates that came from that, and the previous business still does. Right. I'm trying to do the same. So we're close to universities. We have a relationship with Bristol University. I've actually held a lecture there about blockchain in Bristol. We've done the same in Liechtenstein. Again, those are fintech friendly, and those are, new people are graduating. They're getting into blockchain. They want to understand what are the hurdles, what are the technology considerations. And a lot of, engineers in that space are now looking at blockchain as a career path.
So I'm hearing that's a strategy, a very sensible and mutually beneficial strategy for both parties. Now let's talk about UNIBRIGHT. UNIBRIGHT's interesting because they're very focused on enterprise. So are you. What's the connection? You're both German.
That's the connection. We're both German. No. Just joking. UNIBRIGHT, they're building this kind of template engine, right? So they're putting like a designer, a template engine on top, and they make it user-friendly for you to basically build smart contracts. In future, and this is the agreement, they will build templates for our model, for our systems and services, and that's a relationship. And vice versa, we're advising UNIBRIGHT on, security tokens, equities and all that, and we work together. Especially in Germany, a lot of the teams, they know each other. We know a few of the tech teams, and we talk to quite a lot of them. Because as you know, Brad, you need to be open-minded. You need to talk to a lot of teams. You watch and learn and utilize the best ideas.
Right. And given your experience, I find this even now, are you getting the sense from the community generally that perhaps there's a lack of understanding of just how beneficial both these two companies are going to be for the future. And I mean this in a real sense. For real world markets, the propensity for both of you to collaborate together and be of use and demonstrate that through proof. Do you think that's really being noticed right now?
Yeah, well, we've been running under the radar, and a lot of the other projects are running under the radar as well. I think there's still a little bit of hype, and if you have a big marketing presence, if you talk to a number of influencers and they support you and they talk about you, you're getting noticed. I think for ourselves, we're definitely getting more and more noticed. We try to deliver product services and just do our thing. We don't really like to ride the hype wave as a lot of the guys in our community know. And I think they're also proud of that we're doing things a bit differently.
Yes, well, you're certainly not paying influencers, which is to your credit. I know I wasn't paid. This is a free service. But let's now talk about some of the features. Let's talk about your wallet. How important is that component to the overall design?
Yeah, the wallets are really important, and we've actually built something interesting. So we have within our blockchain, we have a nested account structure. So for example, we have an issuer, and an issuer manages a number of wallets and private keys, which are the shareholders and all that. And within the nested structure, the issuer can actually manage and can retract them, can change them, can give them back. And that's really, really important. If you look at equities, for example, in case there's a dispute between a number of shareholders, or for example, the shareholder dies, the issuer needs to be able to reissue the tokens or the shares, as an example. And within our blockchain model, you can do that. The issuer can revoke and can recapture these tokens and potentially distribute them to something else. So for example, if there's a legal dispute, if there's a dispute with government-related things, and no other blockchain can do that because it would go against the form of decentralization, and you hold everything yourself. However, when you have issuers and you have shareholders, it's a whole different space because you are restricted by equities and securities law, and that means that tokens, assets need to be able to be recovered. Yeah.
Right. So obviously you're building out key technology, but what about, and I want to go back to that discussion we were discussing about the licensing. I want to move it globally now for a moment. Have you factored in the potential for you to be global, and what's required of that with regard to SEC, with regard to appeasing the requisites of the governments that be?
Yeah. Well, it's very simple. If you do a primary issuance, so for example, you issue a new security token, you need to have regulatory approval to do that. And very few countries have done that. Singapore have done one issuance. Liechtenstein have done one issuance. I think the US are doing something. They're filing that under Reg D or Reg A or something, accredited investors. So you can do that. That's the hardest element. That is really, really hard. It takes 6 to 9 months of legal work. You need to make sure that you have accredited investors, that they're sound, that they're all named and all that.
Right.
Our business, we're not focusing so much on that. We're focusing on the servicing element. And to be able to do a servicer, you need to have a transfer agency, a registration license in the US. You don't really need a license to do that in Europe. You need a specific license in Asia.
So are you thinking of these markets though, Sash? Are you thinking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we have, at the moment, we have clients in the US. We're working with a number of private banks and initiatives in the US. I'm actually in Asia, in Singapore and Hong Kong in a few weeks, and we're talking to guys over there, and we have a few potential prospects in there, and we're obviously operating in Europe. So our platform is a global platform, and we always had a global focus in mind.
Let's talk about that. Since you're mentioning the word business and you're talking about partners, I've got a few lists of verticals that you represent. So I'm just going to name them. So you've got private banks, asset wealth managers, equity, asset wealth, stock exchanges, financial services. Those verticals are just an example of some of the areas in which you're going to cater for. But I really want to hear from you exactly where that's going with regard to names. Tell us what you can. I know you're not going to, but I'm going to dig. What businesses are you dealing with? What contracts are you signing, and how big is this getting?
So a good example, private banks. Private banks in the US, for example, and there's 4,000 private banks in the US. They use broker dealers. They use a DTC, a register, and some of those providers. They have assets. They have real estate. They have debt. They have equities and all that. and they have customers, and they want to provide new mechanisms where they can put new offers on the blockchain, they can tokenize them, and they can give them out to their customers. Their customers are accredited, they're known, they have a bank account, and they want to offer them new products, new services. However, they don't want to go through the many middlemen. They don't want to go through all the barriers because their margins are getting smaller and smaller through that process. So
Right.
our products and our services, we sell into these guys, and we're working with a few of them.
Okay.
So those are private banks. And the same we have in Europe and in Asia, it's the same.
So how big are these banks? Again, going to dig. Are we talking about internationally recognized banks?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are a few large banks. There are a few regional banks. They have, large and recognizable clients and their assets, and we're working with a few of them.
And Sash, have you signed on the dotted line for any of them already?
Yes, we do.
Okay. What about the other areas, the other verticals?
Private equity. So that's a good example. So private equity is quite interesting because, again, in the stock market at the moment, with the dip and everything, with low interest rates, there's a lot of cash that's floating in the economy. That's a known, right? You can easily get cash for great ideas, for new things, for capital, and these sort of things. So you have lots and lots of family offices and private equity networks. And private equity networks is, for example, a few guys that know a few very high net worth, wealthy individuals, and they discuss and distribute offers to themselves. They look at businesses, they look at opportunities, and they invest. And it's a whole off-market model. They're not going to a stock exchange. It's not a venture capitalist, it's private equity. So they have private money, they're investing in businesses. These guys need products, they need services, they need a register. And we have a few private equity networks that we are actually servicing. One of them is Ideal Corp, where we have a partnership with these guys. And they manage hundreds and hundreds of millions of assets, and they need a service and they need a product. They would like to tokenize these assets, and they want to register the shareholders and the owners, and that's what we do for them. And there's hundreds of thousands of these private equity networks around the world.
Right. So essentially, because you are signing these contracts with these different verticals, you're making real money right now. Talk us through that. And can you talk us through that in the context of the kind of market we're talking about globally when we're talking about equity markets? We're talking trillions and trillions of dollars potentially in that marketplace. What's the size of the pie that you think you can take, and what currently are you doing with regard to revenue?
Yeah. I mean, we sell software licenses for these kind of enterprises. So, they could range from 100K to $500,000 in terms of the size. We also have implementation fees and everything you would have if you choose a software product and servicing product. And that's one element. The equity market is, someone said it's 10 trillion, right? The opportunities, but we also know that non-tokenized assets, so basically assets that are illiquid, right? Art, cars, property, etc. If you can tokenize those, the market is like 250 trillion as of scientific studies and all that. So the opportunities are massive, and financial services and banks and businesses, they know that and they want to get into that.
Right. So what are your internal teams saying? What's your prediction? To be fair, I don't mean to, again, pressure you into sort of FOMO positions, but I'm going to try. Let's talk us through what you envisage with regard to the potential of your own business. Realistically, given that you've already got a model that you're actually making money now, that sets you apart from about 99% of all of the startups right now.
Yeah, well, I look at my previous employer, right, and it was a share registrar, right, and they do multiple services and all that, and their stock exchange market cap is about 10 billion, right, 10 billion Aussie dollars. They are listed on the ASX, and if I can get a fraction of that or a chunk of that, plus all the private businesses, we're looking at a much higher market cap in the traditional sense of how businesses are evaluated, and that's what we're looking at long term. Absolutely.
Right. Let's talk about fees. You allege that you can be fee-less. Talk us through how the consumer can really benefit in that sense.
Well, I mean, a register for a private business should be free, right? You should be able to access services such as voting or doing an AGM, an annual general meeting, managing communications for your shareholders as a private business. It should be free. I think for specialized services, you'd probably have to pay if you want proxy voting, if you want specific dividends or different payment mechanisms, disbursements, or certain disclosures. You have to pay a fee. But I think the core services should be free, especially for small to medium businesses, because again, they make up the majority of the economy worldwide. And if you offer them less fees, the economy will benefit. Yeah? And if we make things efficiently, with our blockchain technology, with our mobile apps and services, if it's efficient and we can run it very, very much quite simply, it should be free. We should give it away, or just for a tiny fraction of the costs that is currently incurred.
Right. Well, let's talk about now the potential for you to interoperate, to interconnect with other blockchains, because there are others that are in the enterprise frame that are specifically doing that. They're not blockchains themselves. They are technology that's going to actualize this kind of interaction. Are you going to do that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And again, our register should be available to anyone and everyone, which means we have to interface to the largest kind of frameworks, Ethereum, as a network. We're looking at building adapters to be able to offer people that want to tokenize securities on Ethereum. We're offering them a share register and where they can utilize our services without moving to our blockchain. We don't want people to always utilize our own blockchain. That's not what we are, but we want them to have the same tool set. So we're looking and seeing how security tokens and the market evolves. And then we will support, the EOSs, the Ethereums, and whoever gets into that space. But we're not going to support everyone. We've got to be quite balanced and quite tactical in the sense of supporting those that actually go into that space.
Right. Well, just with regard to STOs, right now there's some articles I've read recently suggesting that there's not yet a strong sort of undercurrent of evidence or proofs that there's an uptake in the marketplace for STOs in terms of investment in them. So are you concerned at all that this is a double-edged sword? The concept's there, but is it realistic? Is it something that is likely to happen?
Funnily enough, we don't really care because our services work in the traditional sense. If you are on the stock market and you need a register or you need services because the stock market is a bit too slow, we offer that, and you don't need security tokens for that. You can still use our services and you pay a fraction to that. So we are agnostic and independent from STOs or ICOs or whatever happens. That was always key for our business.
Right, I ask you that because of polymath. So lead us there.
Well, STOs that's definitely the future. If you want to raise capital and you don't want to go to the stock market, you need to issue a security token. That's the future. I think the model has been proven with ICOs, but ICOs had a bad rep and a bad taste, and a lot of utility tokens just don't make sense, which leaves the people with nothing. So you need ownership of something, right? You need ownership in a business, and that's what a security token effectively is. Right. However, regulation and legislation is slowly just catching up. So it's not yet easy to build a security token offering, and that's why guys like Polymath and some of the others are struggling at the moment, because to do an issuance of a security token, it takes probably 6 to 9 months to get the legal framework and everything. And that's why these guys can't scale that quickly, but they're moving in the right direction. They're doing things, and regulation in a few years will adopt, and then it will get easier.
Yes. And also with regard to scalability, there's an independent vetting process, and that also stifles the growth. And that's what sets you apart. So tell us about your asset with regard to that point of scalability and not having to vet independently and individually.
Yeah, it's interesting because, we want to offer long-term primary issuance and secondary trading ourselves. Absolutely. That's something we do, and we have the tools to do that. However, at the moment, we're not focusing on primary issuance. We're working with advisors. We're working with other organizations together that basically do the vetting and they do the assessments. They already have the offer. They have a private equity network, for example, or they're advisors. They're advising businesses to go to the stock market. But again, 99% of businesses that are being advised to go to the stock market will not go to the stock market. And with these advisors, we're starting to work together because we can give them an alternative approach to a fraction of the price, because a lot of businesses fail the stock market test effectively because they don't have enough capital, or maybe, you know, it's a bit questionable and all that. Maybe they're great businesses, but they simply cannot handle the burden of bureaucracy and regulation and risk and compliance. And that's where we come into play. So we're talking to a lot of these advisors that are advising traditional businesses.
So essentially, you want to save their businesses money. You also want to save the consumer money, from my understanding. So arguably, given that you have quite an early position and you're currently in the marketplace now, wouldn't you be getting a great deal of business? Wouldn't there be a strong flow from the top down? Wouldn't you be busy? And why haven't you got an even bigger team exponentially and just recruiting people in to build this team out in the enterprise sector to sign people up?
Well, yeah, we've just finished our products, right? Just a few months back. I mean, when we are out selling and on roadshows, I mean, we're just getting flooded with requests, and we're definitely increasing our team now. But we're very German, so we're looking at finishing the products, and then we're starting. We're not throwing people at every opportunity because we're also watching and seeing. We're running a business. That's why we're quite conservative in the sense. But we are definitely moving ahead with full steam, and especially next year, we're going to be on steroids in that sense of selling our products.
Well, talk us through what you envisage with regard to team growth. Are you going to invest in that significantly at that point, and do you have the capital to do it?
At the moment, we don't have the capital. I mean, we did an ICO and our market cap was really small. So we have obviously limitations in the way of upskilling. But we're talking to a number of clients, initiatives that upfronting costs, for example, where we can hire more people. That's definitely something we're doing, and we're quite excited. We have a very, very healthy lead pipeline. Absolutely. We're focusing on a few really, really big names at the moment because that will give us this big, massive oomph. And that's what we're looking at.
Right. So I'll dig into that because people will have asked. So what you've alluded to is that there were a few issues with the ICO that you led. You've rebranded from Chainium now to Own. And because of the sudden change in the market, you would have lost out some of that in terms of, so now you're addressing that with the revenue model.
Yeah. Our timing for the pre-sale and the public sale was bad, really bad. So we did the token sale at the start of the first wave of the bear market. And I mean, we would have sold out in the private sale easily, but we kept a lot of tokens for the public because we believe in our community and we didn't want people to miss out. And then suddenly the bear market hits, and that's why we didn't sell out in the ICO. I have to be quite honest about it. It was probably from a business sense, the wrong approach, but it was the best approach from a community sense. We didn't do marketing. We didn't do much hype. We didn't pay influencers or people, which means a lot of people aren't aware or weren't aware of us. And again, that keeps us sane. However, in saying that, because we have such a small market cap and we don't have too many funds, every little penny, everything, we have to turn around 2 or 3 times. We have to be really cost conscious. We can't just spend. If we dump money in the wrong areas, it really hits us. So we're very heavily focused on revenue and businesses and clients because we have to.
Well, let's talk about that. You are a very low cap. Well, how low are you?
I think it's 5 million now.
Okay, so
based on market cap.
A 5 mil market cap, let's just say ballpark. Now that's still substantially low today when comparatively. The risk here is, again, as you've alluded to, is if the other promoters, let's say that term, get involved and they grab onto this because of the low cap potential and because of the business that you're building, the risk there is the immediate growth, this kind of speculative investment that we'll see, spikes and pullbacks. Is that the kind of thing you're trying to avoid and keep under wraps?
Absolutely.
Well, why are you talking to me? Why are you talking to me, Sash? Because people are going to find out about you.
No. I mean, we need exposure, and we want people to understand what we're doing. And our community has been great, and especially over the last few weeks and months, they've done a lot of drum rolling for us because people feel proud of what we're doing and they want to tell others about it. And we really respect that, and we really appreciate that.
Right.
So obviously, the higher the cap, the more it gives you credibility, and that's what we need. But at the same time, we're basically just doing our thing. As I said in my community, all our money goes into development, into product development, into business development, and That's the key thing. I'm not worried about competition because first of all, it's a big market. The more competition, the better because it pushes you. And at the same time, I mean, we've got the experience. We have that huge network of advisors, of people that we know from the industry. We've been servicing and we've run massive registers. You know, I used to manage, you know, thousands and thousands of businesses on our registers and systems and services. Others can't do that. They don't know the ins and outs. And the people we're adding to the team now, they're all massive industry experts. So it just opens doors. Other people will have a hard time replicating that.
So Sash, sorry to interrupt, but how do we push the speculator over the line when it comes to hodling?
I don't know. It's you know, you can't manage speculators. You know, there's
that's the point though, is the speculator can't be managed, but the hodler is the one who perceives the longitudinal value. So is it just simply the approach that you're taking now that arguably could push the speculator into that sort of frame of thinking?
Yeah, well, we're trying to show, I think we're a bit of an anomaly because we're business, we're revenue generating, we're doing our thing, and we're hoping others will catch on to that. And especially our communities, the people that actually purchased and invested in our utility token, the contributors, a lot of them are hodlers, you know, they are holding on to that because they can understand our vision, they can understand it. And because we are not doing things, you know, you don't see Lambo photos of us. You don't see us at parties. We're sitting boringly in the office and working, right? We're attracting a different kind of people.
Right. I thought I might have seen you at DevCon, though. I was wondering if you'd go to that because it was very tech-centric. But you didn't attend DevCon.
Well, DevCon is, that's the Ethereum one, right?
Yes, but I thought you might have gone there possibly for networking, because, again, we're alluding to the potential to engage in other blockchains. So.
Yeah. Again, we have to be really careful with where we spend our money on. We went to Token Fest in Boston. We're looking at conferences. I'm not saying we're not going to conferences, but you know, we're going to TechCrunch. Those are more wider, but we're also attending a lot of industry conferences around securities and equities, where there's industry experts, there's lawyers, there's solicitors, and those are the events we're going to because we're selling and talking to the traditionalists, and they don't. I mean, you know that they don't hang around at blockchain conferences.
No, I totally understand that. So really, you're genuinely thinking about trying to really expand this next year. It's going to be interesting to see what comes of you in the next decade because the pace is so rapid. But again, let's talk about an uncomfortable term, that is government. Are you discussing in any way, shape or form the potentials of this technology to integrate with governments and be adopted in any sense? From the top down.
Yeah, absolutely. So we're talking to Liechtenstein government. I mean, they're thinking they want to support us as well. They feel quite proud of what we've achieved, and we feel quite proud of them. We're talking to the FCA. We're talking to the UK. So basically, the regulator in the UK. We're not focusing too much on government because we're focusing on enterprises. But I do like the government angle, and there are opportunities we're looking at. Absolutely.
Well, we'll be talking more about that when you can tell me more. So generally, obviously, we've looked through a lot. The token itself, the current status, talk us through that. We've seen a significant change in its value. We don't really want to talk about price too much, but I will be vilified if I don't address it. So let's talk about that in the context of what it is. Let's be real about it, and let's talk about its purpose as well.
Yeah. So our CHX is effectively a utility token. So you utilize the utility token to basically process transactions. So it's like Ethereum and gas. You use it for transactions, you use it for services on the platform. And we're currently on testnet, which means our CHX is not used. It's the test CHX we're having, but we're switching to mainnet end of this year, and we're on track in terms of development, which means that CHX will be utilized. It will be used. It will be used by enterprises. It will be used by individuals, by basically the whole network.
And what date is that?
We haven't set a date yet because, I want to allow a little bit of flexibility, but it will be at some stage in December. And we're also running validators or basically master nodes in the sense of, delegated proof of stake. And we're issuing token economics around running a validator and master node in the end of November. That's our goal. So people will know how much CHX do you need to run a node.
Right. And how many nodes are you thinking of running, Sash, in that?
I don't know. It depends. I think it will be a few thousand probably.
Right. Okay. So obviously there's a lot coming. Do you see, you used the analogy before of steroids. Do you see that, the tap comparatively now is dripping? In December, this could be a really different story because, again, it's live. It's accessible.
Yeah, I mean, the guys know every 2 weeks we're releasing new products. So on Friday, we released a reporting dashboard where you can actually look into the register. It's a live dashboard with reports. It looks really nice. Every 2 weeks, we're releasing new products. We're releasing a new investor mobile app that is coming out, I think, end of November in December. And so as shareholders, an investor can use a mobile app to look at their holdings. They can look at their wallet. They can do things. They can vote. We're introducing voting on the blockchain, which is something that no one else has done before. Because when you have shareholders and when you have security tokens, you need to be able to vote on resolutions. If the business changes strategy, you as a shareholder get to vote based on the amount of shares you hold. So we're introducing that in December as well. So by the end of December, we will have a whole range of features and functions, and all of them no one else has done before. And yeah, and every 2 weeks we're releasing new stuff.
I see.
That's the steroid stuff.
And how is your app development as well? Because you're building out apps. You also have third parties. How are they both looking in terms of number?
Yeah. I mean, we've got a good balance. We have, 50% of that team are working on the blockchain, and the framework and the backend services, the interfaces and the APIs. And then the other 50% are working on the apps. With apps, you need less people, but you need really gifted and talented people. We have we're a small team, but we have some amazing talents across the space. Our sales team is amazing. Marketing's great. We have one new marketing person. We have a lot of gifted application and backend engineers. So you don't need a massive team. You don't need hundreds and hundreds of people to build something great. And that's what we're doing at the moment.
Absolutely. Well, Sascha Ragtschaa, it's been a privilege to speak with you. As always, you're a man of knowledge. You're leading something. You've got the experience to back it. And I don't like to have interviews where I sound like I'm excited about a project, but it's very difficult with you because you're evidencing that right now with real deal business. And that is already proof in the pudding that you're moving in the right direction. I do wish you all the very best. Sascha, is there anything you'd like to say as a final statement to the people, to those who are either hodlers or they're considering, an investment in the utility of this for the future? What would you like to say?
I have to say the greatest thing we've done is really to be out there and to have this community. I really have to thank our existing community that have been there from day one for us. I also really thank those guys that take a leap of faith coming onto us now. The community feedback is really important. Guys like you, Brad, the feedback is really important for us because we get that immediate response. We release a product and we get within minutes feedback, and it can be good, it can be bad. And it's a very volatile space, very volatile community. We really respect people supporting us that understand that we're doing things a bit differently. And I really want to thank everyone. I want to thank your audience just sticking with this session for such a long time, because I know I can talk, right, for a long time. and you too, I know that.
Yeah, definitely.
So I really thank you, Brad, for giving the opportunity to speak, because again, we don't have many outlets. And
not a problem at all. It won't be the last time that we'll chat too much. I do appreciate your time, and I thank you for all the listeners for surviving the discussion that Sascha and I have had today. If you'd like to know more, there are social media channels available for Own. It's something that is focused on equity. It's all about making it real for real business and really removing the middleman. That's the key point, is it's going to be financially beneficial for many parties. So look into it if you haven't yet. It's not financial advice. It's just something to understand about innovations happening in business of today for the future. It's Brad Laurie signing off. BlockchainBrad. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you, Sascha.
Thank you very much.